All right, we've got a group from Vermont joining us today. We've got groups from Connecticut, Michigan, Northwest Wisconsin. You guys are all up where it's cold. I'm in Texas. Though it's supposed to be getting very cold in Texas as well. We should be getting down to the teens this week, which is just not common for us. All right, you guys. Well, it is time for us to get started. I'm Jennifer LeMay. I'm going to be helping to moderate our webinar today. The title of our webinar is The Great Communicator, and it's going to be presented to us by Mira Cohen. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can go through just a little bit of housekeeping stuff here, and we'll be ready to go. All right, so we are so excited that you're joining us for the Presidential Primary Sources Project today. As I said, this presentation is entitled The Great Communicator, and Mira is joining us from the Reagan Presidential Library, so we're excited to have her. These sessions are brought to you from a partnership between Internet 2 and the National Park Service. We're hoping to keep today's presentation to approximately 45 minutes. I know that some of you are in classrooms and you may need to jump off before due to time constraints. Please feel free to do that. But we will try and respect your time and be wrapped up at about the 45-minute mark, and then open the floor for questions at that time. So get off when you need to, but we hope that you're able to stay with us and listen to some question and answer at the end as well. A quick disclaimer. By participating in this distance learning session, participants agree to be videotaped, streamed, broadcast, and archived as a part of the program series. Recordings of all PPSP sessions will be posted and available on the Internet 2 YouTube page. In order to better facilitate presenter classroom interaction, we want to review a few expectations. If you're in a classroom and participating via video, make sure that your students come to the front of the room to speak into the microphone if they'd like to engage with the presenter audibly. We want to make sure that we're able to hear them. As I said, because we seem to have such a small group, we would love for as many of you who are willing to join via video for this presentation, because we'd really love to be able to see your faces and interact with you that way. All right, it looks like we've got a homeschool class joining us that way, and a Birchwood Blue Hills is joining us that way. Thank you guys. For anyone who's participating via audio only, you can use the raise hand icon if you want to answer a question or if you'd like to ask a question. And if you do so, then I will help to unmute you and make sure that you're able to participate with us that way. For the students who are participating via chat, make sure that you locate that chat box. You're probably familiar with that, but if you need any help, it should look like a caption bubble. And the presenter will give opportunities for you to interact via chat throughout the presentation. And then for all of our students, we encourage you to participate. This is a great opportunity to interact with our presenters and with your fellow students. We're so excited to have you here. We want to hear your thoughts and your questions. Please be respectful of the chat box and the interactive tools. We want to be able to address as many thoughts and questions as we can, so please only use these tools to respond directly to presenter prompts. If there's any inappropriate or distracting conduct over video, audio, or the chat box, we will remove you from the program. If you'd like any more information about PPSP or to access the video archives or the information about future programs, please visit our website, which is displayed on the screen, internet2.edu/PPSP. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hand it over to Mira, who is going to take it away and teach us about Ronald Reagan.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's really exciting to see all of you and coming in from so many places across the country. So thanks for joining us today. Really, really appreciate it. We're going to be talking about Ronald Reagan as the great communicator, and we're going to chat a little bit, and then I'm going to share some of Ronald Reagan's speeches with you. And we'll talk about those speeches and why Ronald Reagan was called the great communicator. So here we go. In his farewell speech in 1989, this was 8 years into Ronald Reagan's presidency, he said, "And in all of that time, I won a nickname, the Great Communicator, but I never thought it was my style or the words I used that made a difference. It was the content. I wasn't a great communicator, but I communicated great things, and they didn't spring full bloom from my brow. They came from the heart of a great nation, from our experience, our wisdom, and our belief in the principles that have guided us for 2 centuries." So Ronald Reagan was very humble. He acknowledged that he was called the great communicator, but he didn't take a whole lot of credit for it. So I want you all to think about what might make someone a great communicator. And you can go ahead and just share your answers in the chat box. Oh, Jennifer, I'm not actually seeing a chat box. So do you want to let me know what you're seeing?
Yes, I'm happy to help moderate that for you, but if you do want to find it, you should be able to click the More button at the bottom of your Zoom and pull it up that way.
Oh, okay. Let's see. There it is. Oh, great. Okay. I'm seeing. Hmm.
I'm waiting for answers on what makes someone a great communicator. It
Oh,
looks like we have saying things with
yeah.
feeling,
Yeah, I'm
being well
getting it.
spoken with a large vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Large vocab, well spoken, saying things with feeling. I like that. Anybody else? I have from Birchwood, Blue Hills, and Tinmouth Mountain School. Yeah. So let's take a look at what some other people might have said in the past. And thank you, Jennifer, for pointing out where that I can find those comments. I really appreciate that. Um, Good eye contact. I like that. Yeah. So in the past, people have noted that if somebody is personal, conversational, relatable, persuasive, or if they're expressing their values, these might be some other good things. So it's a little bit about what they say, and it's a little bit about how they say it. And it's also about engaging in a conversation with the person they're speaking with so that it's not a one sided kind of thing, that there's an understanding from both sides about what's going on in the speech. What tools does the president use to communicate? Let's take a look at some of them. There can be a presidential speech, a radio address, press briefings. If you take a look at the picture on the bottom right, that's where you see President Reagan in the press room at the White House delivering information to members of the press. And you'll still see a press briefing room today in the White House. It's updated since the 1980s, of course. There are television screens in there, but it's basically looks pretty much the same. You'll have someone speaking to the members of the press who are going to write about what the president is saying. You'll have visits to troops or schools or factories. And if you look at the picture on the right above, you'll see President Reagan speaking to the troops. You could have telephone calls. These days, you get social media. Symbols of the American presidency help let us know that this is the president speaking, whether they're speaking from the Oval Office in the White House, whether they're speaking from Air Force One, in front of Air Force One, whether you hear the music that plays when the president enters, hails to the chief. There are all sorts of different ways for the president to speak and let people know that he or she is representing the office of the President of the United States. Have you ever heard a president speak? And if so, what were they talking about? You might have just watched the inauguration and heard a president speak. There are all sorts of different opportunities. So I'd like to hear what you all have to say. Have you heard a president speak? And if you want to say the inauguration just now, that's a good one, but it might be something else. And it doesn't have to be this brand new president. It can be a different president. Where have you heard a no, you've never heard a president speak? Okay. Anybody else hear or watch a president speak on TV, on the radio, on social media? No? Okay, well, oh, you watched the inauguration. Wonderful. Okay. So you heard the TV, the inauguration, you heard the new president speak. Anybody remember some things the new president was talking about, President Biden? No? Okay. Okay. You've heard a Trump rally? Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay. Galileo, fifth grade, did you talk about peace and liberty? Great. Did anybody go to a Trump rally? I see somebody mention that. Did you see that Trump rally on TV, like where most of us watched the inauguration? Or did you actually hear a president speak in person? Wall reforms in person. Okay. Well, that's exciting. Not everybody gets to see a president in person. Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much. President Bush was saying we got him unity from President Biden. Very nice. These are great answers, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing. Terrific. So why would a president want to communicate? They might want to share their plans or their visions, discuss their priorities. They might want to console a nation in difficult times, bring people together. A lot of people talked just now in the chat about how presidents were sharing ideas about unity, commemorating or celebrating a moment. A lot of times presidents will talk during national holidays and share happy events or create an example as a leader for the American people. So at his first inaugural address, I want you to think about the value that President Reagan was talking about. What was the value? Actually, I missed a slide. So here are some examples of values. Okay, so before we get to President Reagan, we're going to talk about all of you. And you see some of them up here on the slide: freedom, security, honor, equality, opportunity, independence, peace, and bravery. These are some values that are often thought of as American values. If you were president and you had to pick one of these values, which would you talk about and why? Which of these values would you want to talk about if you were president? Let me go ahead and look at the chat. Equality and peace. Great. Okay, and that was from, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Pomeranke. Great. Equality and peace. Anybody want to talk about why they would talk about those values? Peace. Great. Equality and freedom. Okay. Equality and opportunity. Freedom because we enjoy ours. Absolutely. Freedom is very much a part of who we are as Americans. It's right there in the Declaration of Independence. Security, great. So that we would all come together and not harm each other. You guys are terrific. I'm loving these answers. So let's take a look at the value that President Reagan, or the values that President Reagan focused on in his very first inaugural address. And many of you talked about just watching President Biden give his very first inaugural address. So this would be around the same time in President Reagan's presidency, right at the beginning. And he says, to those neighbors and allies who share our freedom, we will strengthen our historic ties and assure them of our support and firm commitment. As for the enemies of freedom, those who are potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice it for it. We will not surrender for it now or ever. So, in President Reagan's first inaugural address, who wants to share with me in the chat group, and everybody can go ahead and do that, which two values is President Reagan focusing on in his first inaugural address? Which two values? Freedom and peace, right? Freedom and peace, great. So everybody is really getting that President Reagan was focusing on freedom and peace. And a lot of you put those in values that are important to you as well. So that's really kind of neat. Now, this is a really hard question, and we're going to come back to it later. So if you don't have an answer for this one now, that's okay. We're going to come back to it later. President Reagan's going to tell us his idea. But think for just a moment, what may be the connection between these two values of freedom and peace? And all ideas are good ideas. There's no wrong answer.
And again, if you'd like to use the raise hand feature, I can call on you. It looks like we have one person who wants to tell us an answer that way. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you and let you give us an answer. Homeschool K, do you want to give us an answer? Maybe not. Anyone else want to raise their hand and give an answer that way?
No? Okay, that's all right. Let's just think on that. I'm not going to give you the answer right now because President Reagan's going to give you the answer a little bit later. The connection between freedom and peace. Just keep that in your head. Okay, so all this was going on. President Reagan was president during the Cold War. Now, some of you might have learned about the Cold War, some of you may not have. In this time, Europe was divided really in two, between those states in blue that were free democratic countries on the left and those states on the right that were communist countries, and they were members of the Warsaw Pact. The biggest country in there was the Soviet Union, or what you see on the map is the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Okay, so just to know, the world was divided really in two. Now, do you think that the United States was a leader, even though you don't see us up here, of the West, of the free states, or of the East, of the Soviet communist states? Do you think we were free and democratic, or Soviet and communists? Which do you all think? And you can just put that in the chat box too. Free or Soviet? Who were we? Okay, folks, sounds like you haven't studied this yet, and that's okay. We were leaders of the free states. So if you take a look at all those states in blue on the left, and you're looking at France and Italy and West Germany and the United Kingdom and other states, these were our allies. And allies, it's kind of like we're on the same team. You know, we're all rooting for the same team. So if you watch the Super Bowl on Sunday, you had some folks rooting for the Chiefs, and you had some other folks rooting for the Buccaneers. So our team was like the West. We were, yay, Western Democratic team. That was us. All right. And still is. All right, so we'll take a look at this speech, and I want you to think about, we talked about values earlier. Which value President Reagan is talking about in this speech in March of 1983. Oh, I see some chats. Free, that's right, free. Okay.
But whatever sad episodes exist in our past, any objective observer must hold a positive view of American history, a history that has been the story of hopes fulfilled and dreams made into reality. Especially in this century, America has kept alight the torch of freedom, but not just for ourselves, but for millions of others around the world.
Okay, so folks, what value was President Reagan talking about there? If you want to just put in the chat box, that'd be great. What value?
Birchwood says freedom.
Yeah,
Galileo says freedom and staying positive about our history. Pomeranke says freedom.
yeah, you guys all got it. Absolutely. Freedom, that same value that he talked about.
But whatever sad episodes exist in
Okay.
our past,
Okay, so that speech was called the Evil Empire speech. Okay, so think of that speech you just saw. This is President Reagan talking in 1984 in France, in Normandy, for a 40th celebration of D-Day, which helped end World War II. So here he is in France, and he's speaking. You can see Mrs. Reagan to his left, our right, and he's speaking. These are veterans from World War II that he's speaking with. They had fought in that very place where President Reagan is speaking. And I want you to think about this, a little bit of a harder question. What is the connection between the first speech you saw and this speech?
there were lives to be rebuilt and governments to be returned to the people. There were nations to be reborn. Above all, there was a new peace to be assured. These were huge and daunting tasks, but the Allies summoned strength from the faith, belief, loyalty, and love of those who fell here. They rebuilt a new Europe together. There was first a great reconciliation among those who had been enemies, all of whom had suffered so greatly. The United States did its part, creating the Marshall Plan to help rebuild our allies and our former enemies. The Marshall Plan led to the Atlantic Alliance, a great alliance that serves to this day as our shield for freedom, for prosperity, and for peace. In spite of our great efforts and successes, not all that followed the end of the war was happy or planned. Some liberated countries were lost. The great sadness of this loss echoes down to our own time in the streets of Warsaw, Prague, and East Berlin. Soviet troops that came to the center of this continent did not leave when peace came. They're still there, uninvited, unwanted, unyielding, almost 40 years after the war. Because of this, Allied forces still stand on this continent. Today, as 40 years ago, our armies are here for only one purpose: to protect and defend democracy. The only territories we hold are memorials like this one and graveyards where our heroes rest. We in America have learned bitter lessons from 2 world wars. It is better to be here ready to protect the peace than to take blind shelter across the sea, rushing to respond only after freedom is lost. We've learned that isolationism never was and never will be an acceptable response to tyrannical governments with expansionist intent. But we try always to be prepared for peace, prepared to deter aggression, prepared to negotiate the reduction of arms. There were lives to be rebuilt.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and pause it there. The connection between the Evil Empire speech and this speech at Pointe-à-Hoc and Pomeranke School, really great answer. It talks about President Reagan talking about coming together and building a community. He talks about freedom. He talks about coming together with the other allied countries. And if you think about that map we looked at before, that's all those countries in blue, to protect our freedom and to work towards peace. So that's really good. President Reagan was really, really good at connecting with the people he was talking to. And if you think about earlier when we looked at what makes a great communicator, connecting with the people that he's talking to is really an important part of being a great communicator. So at the same time period, the 40th anniversary of D-Day, President Reagan also spoke at Omaha Beach. And in this speech, he talked a lot about a woman named Lisa Zanata Henn and her father, Peter Zanata. Now, it's really interesting with this speech because you can see that Lisa wrote President Reagan at the White House. And she was just a, everyday American citizen. And she wrote a story about her father and her father's experience in World War II and how he would talk to her about what happened there. And she asked to attend the ceremony. And this letter ended up on President Reagan's desk. And not only was Lisa Zanatahan able to attend the ceremony with 3 members of her family, she found out that a big part of her story was actually included in President Reagan's speech. So when you see in just a moment President Reagan giving this speech at Omaha Beach to a really big audience, to the American people at home watching the speech on television, just like you all, many of you, watch the inauguration ceremonies and those speeches at home, he's not only talking to all those different people, he's also talking at the same time directly to Lisa Zanata. Let's take a look. It's really interesting.
She ended with a promise to her father, who died 8 years ago of cancer. I'm going there, Dad. And I'll see the beaches and the barricades and the monuments. I'll see the graves, and I'll put flowers there just like you wanted to do. I'll feel all the things you made me feel through your stories and your eyes. I'll never forget what you went through, Dad, nor will I let anyone else forget. Dad, I'll always be proud. Through the words of his loving daughter, who is here with us today, a D-Day veteran has shown us the meaning of this day far better than any president can. It is enough for us to say about Private Zanata and all the men of honor and courage who fought beside him 4 decades ago. We will always remember. We will always be proud. We will always be prepared, so we may be always free.
So how did you all feel while you were watching that? How did you feel? Anybody have any feelings while watching that? Hopeful, sad, proud to be an American, emotional? Yeah, safe, cared for, and happy. Great, you guys. Yeah, so this is how a lot of Americans felt when they were watching this speech, and you can still have all those feelings today. So part of being a great communicator, we can say, is, bringing people together and, bringing out some of these emotions and some of these feelings that we might share as Americans together. Okay, so this one gets a little more complicated. We talked about how Europe was divided between East and West. This is actually the city of Berlin after World War II. There was a wall running through this actual city. So I want you to think about how many of you may be separated from family, from grandparents, from friends right now, temporarily during this pandemic, because of some of the restrictions that we're all going through to keep ourselves and our communities safe. Well, in Germany, in Berlin, in that city, there was actually a wall running through the city, separating the free part and the communist part. So this is right after World War II, but this wall stayed up a long time after. So think about what life would be like if there was a wall running through your city and you thought, not just temporarily, but you imagine that you might never be able to see people on the other side of the city again. What would that feel like? What might it feel like to be separated from people on the other side of the city, your family members, you know, forever? Or what you think might be forever? What might that be feeling like? Sad, scared, scary. Yeah. This was angry. Good. So this was a very hard time for people living in Germany, in Berlin. And that wall that you can see over there on the right, yeah, it's decorated on the right, you know, which is, you see on the free side, it's decorated. And on the side with the tanks and the soldiers, that's the Soviet side. There's no decorations, okay? So it's a scary time. And that wall stood as a symbol of communism, as a symbol of that lack of freedom that people had in the East in that time. And President Reagan talked about that. Um, and here's what he says. We'll talk first of all about what he says, and then we're going to go back. I want you to think about what the what's that? Oh, I want you to think about what the connection is between freedom and peace, like I asked you all earlier. In this speech, President Reagan talks about the wall, and he also talks about the connection between freedom and peace. So listen for what he says is the connection between freedom and peace. Let's go ahead and watch.
But in the West today, we see a free world that has achieved a level of prosperity and well-being unprecedented in all human history. In the communist world, we see failure, technological backwardness, declining standards of health, even
Well, gee.
the advance of human liberty can only strengthen the cause of world peace. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Okay, any thoughts on what President Reagan says is the connection between freedom and peace? That's a hard one. If you have freedom, are you more or less likely to have peace? They are connected. You can't have one without the other. You're more likely to have peace with freedom. Yeah, that's right. So President Reagan really talked about how you need freedom to achieve peace. Do you think that a free people is more likely or less likely to be peaceful? Is a free people more or less likely to be peaceful? Well, President Reagan thought that a free people would be more likely to be peaceful. And he really thought that those two values that he talked about right up at the beginning of his presidency, and even here towards the end in 1987, that those two things, freedom and peace, were very, very much connected. If we take a look here, President Reagan is delivering 8 years later from the very first speech we looked at, a farewell from the Oval Office, the office of the President of the United States. Let's just take a look and watch this all come together, where President Reagan again talks about how important he believes freedom is. And he talks about what he thinks he accomplished and what the work left to do is.
We've got to do a better job of getting across that America is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare. It's fragile. It needs production. So we've got to teach history based not on what's in fashion, but what's important. Why the Pilgrims came here, who Jimmy Doolittle was, and what those 30 seconds over Tokyo meant. You know, 4 years ago, on the 40th anniversary of D-Day, I read a letter from a young woman writing to her late father, who had fought on Omaha Beach. Her name was Lisa Zanetta Henn, and she said, "We will always remember. We will never forget what the boys of Normandy did." Well, let's help her keep her word. If we forget what we did, we won't know who we are. I'm warning.
Okay, so he's actually talking about talking to students and teaching kids like you all today. So I would imagine that he would be pleased to know that we're still talking about his values of freedom and peace here all these years later. Now,
We've got to do a better job
I'm
of
gonna
getting
stop
across that
sharing.
America is freedom.
Oops,
Freedom of speech,
we're still
freedom
talking.
of religion,
Hang on.
freedom of enterprise, and freedom is special and rare. It's fragile. It needs production. So we've got to teach history based not on what's in fashion, but what's important. Why the Pilgrims came here, who Jimmy Doolittle was, and what the...
Okay. Okay. Hello?
We're here, but we lost your screen share.
Oh yeah, I turned it off.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That is the end of my presentation. Does anybody have some thoughts that they want to share?
You guys are welcome to use the raise hand feature to ask any questions you have, or you can type them in the chat. While you guys are thinking about that, there was one question earlier that I wanted to go back and address. Someone asked, is it important for a president or a good communicator in general to be able to speak many languages? Have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, you know, it always helps, and President Reagan would sprinkle in some phrases at that speech where you saw him talking at the Berlin Wall. He was on the free side of Berlin asking Mr. Gorbachev, who was the head of the Soviet Union at the time, to tear down that symbol of, you know, a lack of freedom, of oppression. He actually did use some German phrases. Other presidents, like President Kennedy, have used some of those phrases. Most American presidents don't speak multiple languages, but they do learn a few phrases when they visit foreign countries, or when they invite members of foreign countries to visit them here in the United States at the White House or at other places. Yeah. Do some of you speak multiple languages? Does anybody here speak more than one language? No, that's okay too. So you can still be president even if you don't speak more than one language. You can learn a few phrases out of courtesy and out of friendship. No, President Reagan was not a criminal. No, he was not. Where did you get that idea from? Okay, well, You know, when people are presidents, all sorts of funny ideas get passed around. Some people like them and some people don't. President Reagan was a really popular president, but every president has some people who don't like him or her. And that's okay, because that's part of our democracy. But no, President Reagan was not a criminal.
Do we have
Anybody, any other questions? Oh, there's a raised hand from Homeschool K.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and ask them to unmute and they can ask their question.
Yeah. No?
I
Okay.
guess not. Okay.
All right. Well, one last question for you all. Do you think President Reagan was a great communicator based on our conversation today? Do you think so? Yes? Okay. All right. So if you said yes, why do you think he was a great communicator? And there's no right or one answer, no right or wrong answer. If you said yes, why do you think yes? Oh, we still got emotional. Yeah. So he still really tugged at our heartstrings all these years later. He helped bring peace to a nation. Very nice. Oh, this is really great, you guys. Oh, that didn't have it. I'm not a communicator that as good as normal people communicate myself. That's okay. You all are kids, you know, you're not necessarily born a great communicator. You become a great communicator by, you know, learning what speaks to people and learning how to articulate and share your thoughts and your values and your ideas. Galileo, fifth grade, I love this answer so much. His ideas of freedom and peace and teaching history are still relevant today. Yeah. So he was talking about values that are still important today. You know why? Because they're American values. And those values are going to be something that we're going to stand for, you know, just as long as we're America. I'm sure his acting experience, yeah, his acting experience did help with his communication skills. But those are things you all can still learn how to do. He was humble. You all remember that we talked about his humility at the beginning. He didn't really just put himself above others. He thought of himself as someone who serves others. And you really saw that. You saw him not only talking about Lisa Zanata Hen in that address that he gave at Omaha Beach in 1984, you saw him talking about Lisa Zanata Hen again in his farewell speech. And she was an everyday American who made a big impression on him. And he didn't really put himself above her. He elevated her. He thought of everyday Americans and he interacted with everyday Americans, you know, of all different, you know, backgrounds. Like they were really special because everyday Americans are really special and were really special to President Reagan. Yeah, I love that you pointed out his humility. I think that's super important. So it's not so much about what you say is who you honor in those actions that you take. So actions can speak louder than words. And that made him a great communicator too, just by elevating everyday Americans. I love that. Anybody else want to share? Okay, you guys did an awesome job. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Out here in California, it's not too early anymore. So for a lot of you who are tuning in super early, I really, really appreciate that. And thank you so much for Internet 2 and Jennifer for making all of this possible for us and bringing us all together and creating a community here with the Presidential Primary Source Project. I really appreciate that and I'm really grateful. Jennifer, do you have anything else to say?
No, I just want to thank you again, Mira, for sharing your expertise with us and doing it in a way that was so exciting and fun to watch. I hope that all of you who joined us today really learned a lot and that you'll check out our future programs and join us again another day. It was so nice to see you guys. Bye-bye.
Are you still on it or no?
Yeah.